Hello everybody, welcome to another live. In today's live, I would like to talk about the importance of nurturing, recognizing and following the child's unique interests. So one of the big factors that attracted me to the Montessori method and has always kept me, focused on Montessori education rather than going to any other method of education is this focus on recognizing, observing and supporting each child's individual interest that comes up. What I believe as an educator who's been working with children for 20 years is that interest is the key factor to successful development of the human being. And it's not just Dr. Montessori who recognizes this. There are other educational philosophers such as Waldorf, Reggio, there's lots of other educational philosophies that also recognize that interest is such a key factor in the successful development of the human being, not just the child, but the human being. Dr. Montessori tells us that the child is guided from within by an inner teacher, and that inner teacher is going to guide the child to focus their attention and specifically, seek things in their environment and engage with those things in the environment that are going to support their learning and development. That inner teacher urges the child. It creates this deep interest in the child so that they are compelled, they are urged to, pay attention to specific aspects of their environment. If you think of this world as one huge environment, there are so many different things that can pull a child's interest. But the inner teacher guides the child to those things that are necessary for their learning and their development. Interests are unique to each individual child. We do know as we go through the Montessori philosophy, we learn about specific sensitive periods, specific interests that arise, within a certain age range, those interests will arise. But the really kind of, individual interests, like say interest in bugs or interest in a leaf, all of those kind of individual things, they are very much individual to the particular child. We can't say that every child who's 2 years and 5 months is going to be interested in trucks. We can't say that every child who's 3 years is going to be interested in mark making. It doesn't really work like that. There is a range of things, but when it comes to the really, really, really specific stuff, it's based on the individual child. And I'm telling you my experience as an educator, that there are no two children who are alike in their interests, just as we adults, we are completely different ourselves, and there's no two of us that are going to be exactly the same in our interests and in our desire to follow our interests and so on. Even if you take two identical twins, and I've worked with quite a few sets of identical twins, you take two identical twins who are raised in the same family with the same circumstances, attending the same school, the same teacher, everything is the same, you will see that those two identical twins will have differences in their own unique interests. And it is those specific unique interests that I believe unlock the child's potential, unlock their ability to learn and develop and become who they are supposed to be. But it's so sad that what tends to happen is we as parents or educators, we do not pay much attention to the interest, which is so fundamental and so key to the child's learning and development. We don't pay attention to it, and instead we distract the child by giving them other things, and by time the child loses their interest. So that factor that can really unlock the child and give them all the success that they need and allow them to reach their full potential, that gift that is within the child to follow their interest, is taken away because we tend to distract them from that. And we don't do that on purpose. A lot of the times we are doing this without realizing. And this is one of the sad things that I see happens. And then by time, a child who has so much eagerness and interest to learn loses their interest and loses their eagerness. So I want to talk about this interest more in this video. So interests they come in a journey where they'll be coming and they'll be going. So at times you'll see there'll be a child who's interested in horses, and then after a few months that interest will change. Maybe they're interested in the rain, and then that interest will change, and then they become interested in, like a puddle. Then that interest goes away. Interests in the children are always changing. It's like a journey. If you follow a child who's on an interest, who's got these very profound interests, if you follow the child, you'll be going on this really unexpected journey of going through so many different amazing areas of interests. And if you follow the child, this journey is going to be so exciting and interesting for you as an adult. And I can tell you this because I did that with my child, and I could never predict what he was interested in. And he took us on some really unique and interesting interests. And I also do this with the children in our school. And we never know what they're going to come into the classroom showing an interest in. If you follow the child, you are prepared to go on this incredible journey where you don't know what you're going to be learning about. And it's all going to be based on that inner teacher that's guiding your child's interest, if we truly follow the interest that's there. Now, one of the reasons why we fail to recognize interests and why the school system fails to follow children's interests is because there is this underlying misconception that a lot of people have developed that children do not love to learn, or they do not like to learn. If you speak to a regular parent who's got their child in mainstream, or a regular teacher who's, teaching in a mainstream school, they'll tell you that there's just children who simply don't like to learn. That conception, to me, is completely invalid. Every single child, in fact, every single human being has a love for learning. They have an interest in learning. But it's just what we are giving them, or what we are expecting them to do, is not matched with what the inner teacher is directing them to do. And with time, that child will stop telling us or showing us what they are interested in. And then with time, that interest will slow down, and then we begin to have these ideas that this child doesn't like learning, or this child is not interested. I get lots of parents who come to me and they'll say to me things like, this child doesn't like learning. My other children are okay, but this child, he doesn't like academics, he doesn't like learning, he's not interested in anything. And I look at them completely puzzled. How is it possible that there is a child who's born with no interest? No, every single child is born with a love of learning. Every single child is born with this deep-seated interest to know about the world that's around them. But what happens is, without us realizing, we begin to take away this interest in the child, and we begin to label them as children who don't like to learn, or children who are not interested. But Dr. Montessori tells us that every single child has an interest and love in learning, and they are born with that. So what actually happens? So they're born with that interest and that love for learning. They have this inner teacher who's guiding them. So what actually happens when you have a 7 or 8 year old who just doesn't want to study anything, or they don't want to learn anything, and they're just showing no interest? So what happens in this process? They're born with this interest to learn, and then somehow along the way they lose it. And there's actually research that has been done about this idea of interest or intrinsic motivation, and it shows that if you take an infant or a toddler, they have lots of eagerness to learn and interest to learn different things. And then when you take a 3-year-old and you put them into preschool, they have excitement to try so many things. And then when you see that same 3-year-old later on, when they're like, say, 5, they've lost some of that interest. And then when you see them when they're 8 or 9 or 11, then they almost have no interest. There's research papers that have actually studied children over a long period of time, and they've shown that yes, with time, this intrinsic motivation, or this interest in the child, it kind of, is lost. The flame that was burning in the child to learn about the world around them, that flame is dimming with time. This does happen, but it happens because we don't realize what we are doing. If you take, for example, a young baby in their first year of life, unfortunately, a lot of people have this idea that babies cannot learn or they don't learn. So we tend to just leave the baby to themselves. We let them explore, we give them some toys, we let them do what they're doing, but we don't actually teach the child because we don't believe that babies can learn, so we don't teach them and we kind of just let them be. Now, babies do learn, by the way, but because we have this misconception that babies don't learn and we leave them and we give them that space, what actually happens is they learn so much by the directive and the inner teacher. I think I got disconnected there. I think I'm back now. So I was just saying that the baby learns so much. They learn to walk. They learn to talk. They learn to, so many things. They just learn so much just through their own exploration before we actually sit and teach the child. The things that they learn would be incredibly hard for an adult to learn them if they were put in that same situation. But because the baby is left, because we have this false idea they can't learn, we don't try to teach them. Because they are left to follow their inner teacher, they accomplish all of these things with eagerness, with ease, because they are allowed that opportunity to do that. If you observe, let's say, an 8-month-old baby who's just beginning to crawl, and you put them on the floor and there's an object of interest, let's say a few meters in front of them, and they see it, you will see such intense interest and such eagerness to move and crawl to that object so that they can hold it and explore it and learn about it. Everything that this infant is doing is learning. They're exploring. So if you put this 8-month-old baby down, you're going to see this extreme eagerness as they are urged to explore that object that's there. And they will keep trying, and they won't, it doesn't matter whether they're tired, it doesn't matter whether they can't crawl, they will keep trying to get a hold of. That's the interest, the pure natural interest that's inside the child, urging them and driving even the smallest of babies, driving them to learn about the universe that's around them. So this is natural. You can observe it in your own baby if you watch them. You can observe and see this keenness from the youngest of ages. But what happens is that we have this idea they can't learn, so we lead them to their own devices, and they learn a lot because we're not interfering. But as soon as we start to see that our toddler or our 1-year-old is starting to, let's say, learn our own conception that they're learning, and we start to see that we can teach them something, we tend to step in and we tend to redirect them to what we value. So we begin to think, all right, my child is now, 18 months or 2 years, and now I can teach them the colors, and I can teach them the shapes, and I can teach them, the letters, and I can teach them counting, and I can teach them numbers. And we tend to step in, and instead of letting that natural teacher that has guided the child and guided their interest for the last 18 months or 2 years, instead of letting that natural teacher continue doing its work, we step in and we begin to try and teach this young child those things that we value. So because we value letters, we will get a puzzle with letters on for our 18-month-old baby. Because we value our child being able to recite all the colors, we will get things that have the colors for the child to recite the colors. But we don't really pay attention to what the child is telling us that they're interested in. So this little 18-month-old or 2-year-old, they have these intense interests. If you watch them, they will crawl down and squat just to follow the ants as they walk along the floor, right? They will find a dried up leaf on their walk in the park, and they will hold that leaf in their hand and they will guard it with all their heart and look after it with such intensity. But because we don't value those ants or that leaves or those other small things that they're interested in, because we don't really value them, we're not looking for them, so often we don't notice the interests that are taking place. But those interests are there. If you have a 18-month-old or a 2-year-old right now, step back from what you value and start to value what your child shows an interest in. What tends to happen is, because we have been conditioned or I like to use the word brainwashed, because I believe that we are brainwashed in one way, because we are conditioned and brainwashed to believe that the value of the human being is based on how good they do in their academic learning. The value of the child is based on how well they do at school, or our success as a parent is based on how clever our child is, in their letters, in their mathematics, what grades they get. Because we have been conditioned to believe this, our focus and attention when we turn to the child is often about the letters, the numbers, and whatever it is that might allow, that we want to introduce to our child, so that they do this quicker, so they can learn faster, so that they can do better at school, so that we feel that we are successful. And this is not your fault, and this is not our fault. This is the system that is around us, and this is the system that we have been raised in, and it has conditioned us to believe that if you can teach your 2-year-old to read, then you've done an amazing job. But it doesn't matter whether that 2-year-old is still wearing their diapers or not, and it doesn't matter whether the 2-year-old can feed themselves or not, and it doesn't matter whether that 2-year-old has independence or not. All of those things don't matter. What matters is that your 2-year-old can read. This is part of the programming that has been there, and these, this new generation that's coming, a lot of people have come away from that. But this is something that's been there for a long time, and that's why you see programs teach your infant to read or teach your infant to count. That's why lots of parents, they'll come to me and they'll say to me, oh, I have a 18-month-old, they're so clever, they can count to 100, because we've been conditioned to think that that's what's valuable. So we have our cute, pure 18-month-old or 2-year-old baby who has all this eagerness, and they've done so well learning and developing when we've left them to follow their natural interests. But when we start to feel that they can learn, and we start to feel that we can teach them, we begin to get those things that we value, the letters, the numbers, the shapes, the color. We begin to get those things that we value, and we begin to teach it to the child. Now, some people will argue with me, and they'll say to me, my 18-month-old baby loves letters, and they were so interested in letters. And I teach them letters every day because they're so interested in it. And I ask them the question, who's the first one who introduced the 18-month-old to the letters? Was it your child who took your book and looked at the letters and started, showing an interest in it? Or is it that you got a puzzle, or you got something and you sat there with your child and you started to introduce the letters to them? What is it that happened? It's true. You can go out and you can buy a letter puzzle for your 18-month-old baby or your 2-year-old baby, and you can sit them with them every day, and you can start to tell them, this is A, this is B, this is C, and do the puzzle with them. And it's true. Your child can get excited, your child can get happy, your child can look as if they're interested. But usually they're not truly interested in the letters. Usually they're interested in the interaction. They're interested with the fact that you're sitting with them, giving them that undivided attention. They can sense your eagerness and your excitement to teach the letters. They can sense it. And because they can sense it and they see that their mother is excited and happy, they want to do it. Every single time that child says A, you clap your hands and you get excited, and you tell everybody around you, look, my child can say ABC. They see that. And they want you to be happy, and they want you to be proud, and they want you to be excited. So they do it again, and they do it again, and they do it again for you. But that true interest in letters most often is not there. Now, I'm not somebody who thinks that 2-year-olds cannot read. I am not somebody from that at all, because I have worked with a number of 2-year-olds who can read. But every single one of those 2-year-olds who read, they didn't read because their parents taught them or because somebody taught them. They read by absorbing themselves. They just absorbed and they taught themselves to read. I have seen this. And in almost all the cases I have seen this, almost all of them, those children have been either high-functioning autistic or they have been a savant, right? Every single child that I have seen that, it's not just the normal average child who doesn't have any special needs who just does that, right? It's children who their brain works in a different way. And because their brain works in a different way, they absorb the reading. I have worked with 2-year-olds or 3-year-olds who can read and their parents don't even know they can read. Their parents have never taught them to read, but they just absorb the reading. So I'm not by any means saying that there's no 2-year-old or 3-year-old who can learn to read, so don't teach them to read. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying here is that in most cases, when you see your 2 or 3-year-old is interested in letters, often it's because of your own excitement and eagerness to teach them those letters that they begin to do that for you. And it's not your fault, because this is what we have been conditioned to believe. We've been conditioned to value that. And sometimes it's not even to do with conditioning. Sometimes we just want to do something with our child and we don't know what to do, and everything around us is pointing to letters and numbers, and so we do that. But in fact, that 2-year-old who you do your letter puzzle with, they are more interested in the wood. They're more interested in the colors. They're more interested in the putting the letter piece in the piece. They're more interested in those aspects, because those aspects are more towards what a child who's 18 months to 2 years is typically interested in. The child who is 2 years is trying to develop their independence. They're trying to develop their language. They're trying to develop their muscle control, their movements. That's what they're truly interested in. Activities that are going to help them to develop that. That's what they are seeking every single day. So sometimes your child will take that letter puzzle and they'll do it again and again, but it's not that they want to learn the letters, but it's just that they're interested in puzzles. So if you truly stand back and you observe your small child and you see what is it that they're actually showing an interest in, then you can begin to follow that. If you facilitate and you follow your child's natural, innate, unique interest, you will be supporting them and facilitating them on their path for unlocking their full potential. And every single child's interest is different. So what happens actually when a child loses their interest? Let's go back to this child who's doing the puzzle. They see that their mum is so excited, or their dad is excited, or whoever it is who's doing it so excited. Their teacher's so excited every time they do this thing. So the child begins to realize that they have to give more attention to these letters or these numbers or whatever it may be that you're teaching them. They have to give more attention to those things because that's what you would like them to do. And the child begins to focus there. And by time they begin to become disconnected from their inner teacher and disconnected from those natural interests that arise, they become disconnected from them. When the child goes to school, even if they have an interest in mainstream school, even if they have an interest, it doesn't matter, because they can't learn what they're interested in if it's not on the curriculum for that week. Even if it's something that's interested for that year, it doesn't matter. Let's say your child, goes on a walk and looks in the pond and sees these tadpoles, right? And they're interested in tadpoles and frogs and stuff, but it's not on your curriculum for that year in that school. Then they cannot learn it at school. Instead, the school is going to get them to learn whatever has been set by somebody else on the education board of that government, set as something that the child has to learn during that year. And by time, year after year, the child becomes distracted from their natural interest. They become distracted from the guide of their inner teacher. They become distracted from that. And they begin to lose touch, and they grow up, and they lose their interest. And that's how we get children who do not show us their interests. And there are children, you can get sometimes 9, 10-year-old, they're not really interested in anything, or they're just interested in games, or they're just interested in watching TV, but they don't really have any unique interests. And that's really, really sad, because they were born with this huge potential and this full burst of interest. They were born with it, and they lost it, not because of them, but because of the environment that they're in. And that's why even if you send your child to school, whatever school you choose to send them to, even if you send your child to school, you can make a huge difference in your child's, education by following their interests at home. You don't have to leave it for the school. You can follow their interests at home. So what do we do to bring it back? Because some of you will be thinking, you know, oh, I didn't follow my child's interest. I did all those things that you said in this video, Nusayba. I feel really, really bad. I don't want you to feel bad. I hope that I tend to go straight to the point, and sometimes my videos are really, really clear and raw. And I hope that I don't make you feel bad, and I hope I don't make anyone leave this video feeling bad about themselves. You know, I have to give the information as it is. And this is part of my personality, you know, that I'm quite straightforward with things, but it's not with the intention of making you feel bad. It's just with the intention of sharing the knowledge, because it's all about what you do next. What happened has happened, and it's all happened with a plan. It's what's you do next that matters the most. You know, we all do whatever we know, whatever we can. And all of us make mistakes. I've made so many mistakes with my son. But it's not something to feel bad or low about. But it's what we do next that counts. So what do you do if you have a child who hasn't had the opportunity to follow their interest, and now they're older and they're not really showing any particular interest in anything? And they don't want to learn, and they don't want to go to school, and they don't want to learn, and they just want to play. And you know, the minute you try to do something that's academic or something that involves what you see as real learning, they go away from it. So what do you do? How do we rectify that? It's actually really simple. Like I said earlier, step back. Take a step back. Get rid of your own agenda and the things that you value and the things that you want your child to know. Get rid of all of those things. Take a step back. Observe your child. Try to find anything that captures their attention. Anything that captures their attention. It doesn't have to be something academic. It doesn't have to be anything to do with school or language, or nothing to do with that. Whatever it may be, anything that captures their attention. Look for it. Keep your eyes pierced open throughout the whole day, and try and see what is it that makes him go quiet, and what captures his attention, and what things does he focus on, and what things does he like to do. And once you observe, once or twice or 3 times, you know, maybe it take you a few days, you can begin to see a pattern of things that interest your child. And whatever it is that interests your child, follow that interest. Follow it. Facilitate for your child to do it. Let's say, for example, you observe your child, you see there's no interest whatsoever. They don't want to go to school. They don't want to do their homework. Right now, they don't want to do their online learning because we are locked at home. They don't want to do any of that. They just want to play with their toys all day. Let's say you observe that, right? And then let's say that, you know, your child is sitting at the dining table and having a meal, and they're getting the knife and they chop everything. Let's say you see that they chop, and that moment that they're chopping, they're fully absorbed in their chopping. Fully absorbed in chopping this, you know, food that they have on their plate. That's an interest then. If they're fully absorbed in it, it's an interest. Use that interest. Set up something for your child to do where they can be cutting vegetables or cutting fruits, or if you have a child who's 7 or 8, let them get involved in the kitchen, let them cook something with you, let them bake something with you, and see if they are keen on doing that. You might observe an interest and you might set something up and then your child doesn't want to do it, and it doesn't matter. This happens even to the best of Montessori teachers. We see something, we think the child's interest, we set up an activity, and then it doesn't work. That's fine. Just observe the child again. Try to find another interest. Maybe you see your child is sitting and looking at the clouds. That could be an interest. They could be interested in clouds. So maybe you can go for them on a walk and look at the clouds and say to them, you know, which clouds can you see? Which one, you know, and talk to them about the clouds. Do, you know, something about the different types of clouds. You could do that as well. You know, you might see that your child is really, really interested in an animal that they see in the garden. Maybe it's a bug. You see that your child finds these little, you know, bugs in the soil, and they're so interested and eager about them, and they keep picking them up. That's an interest. Follow the interest. The more and more and more you follow the interest of your child, the stronger that urging is going to come. And then more and more they will tell you about what they're interested in. And then before you know it, your child is going to be beaming with this bright light and flame of interest. And they will then be learning everything. And you can do this even with a teenager. We have teenagers where I live. In our environment, we have, lots of 140 teenagers. And I always say to my husband, the way for us to unlock their potential is to find their interest. We had a girl who's 18 and, she's just, I'll see her always going up to someone and giving them a little, massage. And then she'll come up to me and say, oh, do you want a massage? And that's her interest. So I follow her interest. I'll find her someone to give her massaging lessons. I'll help her set up a small massaging salon so that she can follow her interest. When the child follows their interest, whatever age, even an adult follows their interest, they are transformed and they are one step closer to unlocking their potential. So it's never too late. It's never too late, and you've never destroyed it forever. It doesn't really work like that. This interest and inner teacher is always there. Sometimes it will be dormant because we haven't given it enough attention, but it's always there and ready to fire up again and guide the child's learning and guide the child's development. So the key here is to observe and follow, no matter how insignificant the interest is. Follow the interest so that your child can bring back that flame and bring back that love of learning, and you will help the child to unlock their potential. So I'm going to have a look at some questions that we have on here. I actually missed all the questions because the comments didn't move as everyone was posting them. So I'm just going to go all the way to the top and see what we have, because there's quite a few. Let's have a look. So one of you said that it's quite sad, and I really believe it is quite sad that the child is born with this interest, but we don't realize sometimes what we're doing, and it's really, really sad. But we can make a change now. We can make a change now. We can tell our friends, we can tell our families, we can tell our colleagues, we can spread this message to everybody so that globally people start viewing even the smallest thing the child pays interest in as significant. So somebody has asked a question. If a teenager is interested in gaming, is it a bad interest? The way that I see it is that, there's loads of interest that can come up in a child, and sometimes those interests are suitable for us to follow and sometimes they're not. And that's very much based on your own ideas and your own belief system and your own value system, right? If, you see your child is interested in something that's harmful for them or harmful for others, I would not follow that interest. But I would try and find actually what is the core of that interest. What is it? Is there another need that's not being met, or is there something else that's going on? I'll try to assess that first before following that interest. Another thing to consider as well is that sometimes children who have lost their interest, they will start to have these addictions in watching TV or in gaming and something like that, because they don't have a passion. And naturally, if you don't have a passion, your attention will easily be taken by something which, is entertaining and so on, because you don't get that true, when you really have an interest and you really follow it, you feel that true sense of fulfillment and purpose. But if you're not having that opportunity, then you're seeking something else that's going to give you that interest, that feeling of fulfillment. And that's often where we see children will become, obsessed with gaming or obsessed with, watching things. So those things I would recommend that you really observe first and try to find out what is the true, problem that is going on there, and address it first before you, completely follow it. Now, if your child is interested in gaming, maybe you can take that to the direction of coding, or take it to the direction of making apps, or, something along that line, and see whether that captures your child's interest. And sadly, we're living in a day and age where gaming is so easy. When I was young, to play the game, I used to have to go on the family computer, and I had to share the time with all my siblings, so we only got 20 minutes, 20 minutes each, and so on. And so it wasn't easy to get addicted to games as it is now, where you can literally just, most people have their own devices, so they could just do it all day long, and there's no one, there's no, let's say, natural consequence to stop them from doing it. So these are the things that you need to consider. So some of you may think, why is it so important to follow your child's interest? I didn't address that directly. I have told you that it helps to unlock your child's potential. But if you allow your child to follow their interest and to study a subject of interest in depth, they will do it with ease, and they will do it with love, and they will do it with eagerness. Now, that ability to research something of interest, that ability to engage in something that they love to a deep, deep level, is transferable. What I mean is that if your child was really interested in horses, and they were supported, and you went to the library and you got loads of horses books, and you took them to horse riding, and they went to see the horses on the farm, and you did all of that, and they learned about the different species, the different types of horses, and what horses eat, and all of this, and that they're mammals, and they learned all of this information. That ability to study the topic of horses and all that process that they've gone through, that process itself is the skill of learning. And that skill of learning is transferable. So next, when they have another interest, they'll be able to read the books about it and go to, let's say they're interested in the stars, then they'll be able to go to the library and get the books, and they'll be able to go to the planetarium and look at the stars, and they'll be able to go to that depth. And each time they have a new interest, they'll go deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper. What they're actually doing is they are learning the skill of, they're developing the skill of learning something. And that can be used again and again and again and again. That's why you find children who go to a Montessori school, who have been allowed to follow their interests, they are very good researchers. Even when it comes to university level, they are very, very good at researching and finding information about something that they are learning, because they've developed this ability to research through following their interest. They've developed this ability to learn a new topic or subject of interest because they've had that all of their life. Montessori children, whether it's at home or at school, are basically researchers. It's a journey of continuously researching, but they don't research what you give them or what the school gives them. They research what they are driven and interested in learning. That's what they research. And that skill is transferable. I can give you an example which shows you the depth of that skill that they learn. So with my son, I've always followed his interests. And he's had so many. He had birds. He was interested in birds for 2 years. Now, he is high-functioning autistic, so he does really obsess over things a lot more than, let's say, the average child would. But his example is still really, really good for you to understand how this is transferable. So he was interested in birds for 2 years, and he went into every single angle of study, everything about the different types of beak, the different type of feet, the flight patterns. He even knew the mating dances of the different birds, and he would, do all these mating dances to show me this bird's mating dance is like this, and this bird is like that, and, and he would, the flight pattern, he would be able to look in the sky and see a bird, see their flight pattern, and by the way, he had absolutely no TV or screen, so all of this was from books and from practical experiences that he's had. It's not through watching documentaries and stuff. Now, all of those skills that he incorporated in his research about birds when he was 6 were transferable later on when he researched horses, and he went to the depth, same depth and more. And then later on when he was interested in cars, and when he was interested in first aid, and when he was interested in biology, and when he was interested, he transferred all of that. Now, the most recent interest that he had about a year ago, I'm talking about significant, huge interest, was boxing. Now, as a mother, when he said he was interested in boxing, I was like, oh my God, what's happened to my kind of science interested boy? Now he's suddenly interested in boxing. Now, I kind of thought to myself, how can he research boxing? Like, what is there to research in boxing? And I thought maybe he's going to research the different boxers and, their fights and so on. But actually, he began to research the different techniques in boxing, the history of boxing, the laws that were created for boxing and why they were created in that way. He began to get lots of books about boxing and cross-reference the information and cross-reference the timelines and so much stuff that I was blown away that even with a topic like boxing, he can apply university, like maybe even PhD level research skills to it. And if he was to write a paper, I'm pretty sure his paper would like be so incredible if he wrote a paper about boxing. But he's not interested in writing a paper. He's interested in understanding boxing. So I just let him understand boxing. His new interest is the kitchen. So I'm really looking forward to how he's going to research cooking and research the kitchen. And, you know, I'm hoping that I might be able to try some interesting recipes if he really goes into that interest. But that can demonstrate to you that this skill from a very young age of being allowed to follow your interests and for the adult facilitating the child's interest, this skill is transferable and is going to, you know, this researching skill is going to be there with your child for life and support them for life. And whatever they choose to go into later, you know, just because they're interested in horses doesn't mean they're going to be someone who's working with horses later on in life. The the interests are all going to change, always change. But whatever it is, when they are adult, whatever their calling is, whatever they find is their passion and their contribution to this universe, they will be able to research that in depth. And that's why it's so important, because when you follow your child's interest from small, you're basically giving them the keys to fulfill their calling and unlock their potential. And this is actually true learning. You can look, there's research papers that have been published even by Harvard University. There's so many that talk about how interest is the key to learning. So I really hope that has benefited everybody. And, you know, now, you know, somebody said about how lockdown has helped us to step back. And yes, it has. It's helped us to step back and see our child for who they are. And there's so many parents now who during this lockdown, they've contacted me saying they don't want to send their child back to school. They don't want to send their child back into they want to approach learning from a different way, because they've had all this time where we've been forced in this situation to actually begin to see the interest in the child. So I hope that this has been beneficial. There's one question is, how does he research? Yes, it's just books. My son was totally from books. And then if there was a Montessori material, he would have that as well. But books was a major thing. We would have, you know, I would go to the boot sales in England, and we would, you know, every single time we went, we always found books on his interests. You know, he was a very lucky boy. Every single time we went, we found books on his interests. I specifically got them used because I knew we had to buy lots of books. And I wouldn't get him the children's books. Like, I would get him the Encyclopedia of Birds that's for bird spotters, even if he was 6. I would get him, you know, really good, detailed, thorough books for whatever he's interested in. We would collect those books and we would have them available for him to take at any time. And if there was a resource that I could get, or if there was, you know, Montessori material, we would incorporate that as well. And he learned so much from that. So much from that. And, you know, he's 16 now, and you know, the adolescent stage is the stage of lots of turmoil and lots of confusion, and, you know, sometimes, you know, it's so, you know, I'm basically excited and waiting to see him as a mature adult and how this kind of learning has truly supported him to do something incredible and amazing. And I really hope that this video is beneficial to yourself and to others. I hope it's beneficial. I hope you can all begin with your children, or if you're a teacher, begin in your classroom to notice those interests and give the children the ability to follow those interests. I really hope, because that's going to make a huge difference for the future of our children, the future of our countries, the future of everything. So one of the questions that's just come up is using TV or YouTube or internet an easy way out for research. So, you know, the way that I see it is this, is that if you allow your child to simply type in Google, you know, different beaks of birds, and they get all these resources, they're not going to go through that process of research with the books. They're never going to want to do that because that's too tiring to use the books. And there's an easier shortcut to use Google. So why should we do that when we can use Google? So I have, I come from an IT family, and my father had a huge IT company before I was born. And I remember when I was probably 1 year old, he sat me in front of one of those massive computers and started to, like get me to do different things on the computer. So, I'm not somebody who doesn't like technology. I use a lot of technology in my life, but I really believe that there's a time and a place for it. So for children who are below the age of 12, I always recommend that they research with real books. Connect them to the real thing first. Let them learn how to look at, research, find books in the library, and then get the book and look through the content and look through the index and find the information and read it, and then get another book and read another book. Let them develop that skill first. And then later there's a time for Google. It's not that they won't have the time for Google, they will. But later, let them connect to the books first. So for my son, he never ever used Google. And now, as a 16-year-old, if he wants to learn something, he'll still go to books. He can use Google as well, but he'll still go to books. So he'll still take the books out and he'll still look through them, and he'll know which book is, for this and that, and he'll read it and he'll look on Google and he'll compare it and he'll say, and also you have to remember that not everything that the child is going to come across on the internet is going to be accurate. That's another thing. So it's good to have really good encyclopedias so that they can reference to those encyclopedias, and he will do that. He will go into Google, and then he'll go into his encyclopedias and he'll cross-reference the information, and then he will, tell me what he's learned, basically. So anyway, so I hope that this has been beneficial to everybody, and please feel free to share this video and spread the knowledge to others. Anybody who may be interested, feel free to spread it to others, and hopefully we will make a change for all, hopefully, inshallah. So anyway, I did tell on my stories that I'm going to be doing this live, and then once I'm finished with this live, I'm going to go onto my other account, Islamic Montessori. I'm going to go into my other account, and I'm going to add a little bit more, but from the Islamic perspective. So this account, I don't necessarily go into too much detail in the Islamic stuff, but I will go onto my other account. So if you're interested in that, I'm going to end this one here. Come and join me over there.